Hello and welcome back to our third and final class in our Albertan Landscapes Watercolor for Beginners. I'm excited to do our last class. Today we are going to be doing a mountain picture, so that's pretty exciting. So we have the foothills for our first lesson, prairies for our second lesson, and for the third we are going to be doing the Rocky Mountains. And so I will let you look at my supplies I have down here and we can get started. I just want to also mention that we are going to be using our scrap paper from the sides of the projects that we cut out. I have these bunch of little scraps, and we're going to make bookmarks at the end for a little extra special treat, I guess. You can give them away to your friends or use them as your own bookmarks, so save your scraps, don't get rid of those. And I'm going to turn you down so you can see what I'm doing, and we'll get started. Okay, so you're going to start by gathering all your supplies like every time. So I have my scissors and my ruler, my reference photo, my sketch, masking tape, my eraser and pencil, and of course my paper, paints, and paintbrush, and a jug of clean water. So I'm going to start off by marking my 5x7 piece of watercolor paper. So I'm going 7 inches down this way, which leaves a few inches at the bottom for our bookmark that we're going to do later. And then we're going to go 5 inches across. Just making sure it's nice and straight, because I don't want my line to be tilted at all. So once you have your lines all nice and straight, we can cut that out. And of course, save those scraps for our bookmarks that we're going to do. I'm going to erase the pencil marks off the side of my painting paper. And we'll get rid of all the eraser leftovers, and we'll start taping down our paper, making sure that it's nice and flat. All right, when you're all taped up, we are going to start by sketching out the main shapes from our reference photo. So I'm going to put the horizon down there, about maybe 2/5 of the way down, kind of roughly sketching where the water is there. That short little tree in the front. And the biggest tree that actually goes up past the mountain peaks, and then this one that's a little bit shorter in the background. And we'll start roughly sketching out these mountains. Yours don't have to be exactly the same as the mountains in the reference photo. If yours have fewer or more little peaks or whatever you want, really. I made my one trunk a little bit too thick at the top, so I'm going to fix that. And remember to keep your pencil sketching nice and light so that it doesn't show up underneath the paint. I'm just going to roughly sketch in a few of the branches on these trees just to kind of get a sense of where they are going to go. And there, I won't have to do as much of the details on the mountains behind where they're going to be because you won't be able to see it anyway. There's a really faint mountain in the background back there. I'm just sketching that in. And then roughly to show where the tree line is going to be at the base of the mountain there. There's some bushes and whatnot there. You can sketch that a little bit if you want to, or leave it plain and do it with the paint. It's up to you. And then I'm going to roughly sketch in some of those clouds. Our sky might look a little bit different, maybe fewer or more clouds than in that reference photo. Like I've said before, the reference photo is a guide. Your painting does not have to look exactly like it, and it won't, but you can change features of it to suit you. So I think I will probably do a little bit less clouds. It's a pretty cloudy day in that photo, and I do want some of the blue sky to show through a bit more than it does in the photo. But you feel free to do yours the way you want it. Now we're going to get some clean water on our brush and get started with our painting once we had that loose outline. I am going to get some of the darker blue and mix it with some of my brown from our last painting to make that kind of deep grayish navy blue that we see in the mountains. We're just going to do our first coat. So I'm going to paint that far away background mountain a light shade of this blue with adding lots of water to the pigment. and wiping off any excess pigment. We want that to be really light, so it's obvious that it's in the background. And like in the previous videos, please feel free to pause the video if you are falling a little bit behind. I know it's hard to paint and watch the video at the same time, so go ahead and pause it if you need to take a little bit more time for a step. Now I'm going to start outlining this main mountain here. That first little peak to the farthest right. And we just want to make sure that the close-up mountain is distinct from that far away mountain that we painted first. So try not to let the darker blue bleed into the lighter that we did in the far away mountain. So you can do that by either letting the first little mountain dry or leaving a small gap of white paper between the two and filling it in later. I'm mixing up a bit of a darker version of that color now, so it's nice and distinct. And I'm going to do some lines down from the top of that peak to show some of that white we see. My mountains aren't going to look exactly like the ones in the reference photo. So the striping of the blue and white is the way I like to do it, to make it show that it's sloping down, and there's some snow and some black rock, or blue, I guess, rock as well. And then I'm going to do this next ridge here and show where it comes down the side. And then it kind of meets up a bit as it comes down lower, closer to the ground. And some more stripe lines down the side of that one into the valley that's between those two peaks. Adding more paint to my paintbrush, I'm going to do the other side of that mountain ridge. I just use the lines to show which direction the rocks are going to create that mountain ridge. And I'm going to do another ridge down below that these will be meeting up at. So anyone that's been to the Rockies knows that mountains aren't just a triangle. There's different faces and shapes, ridges, lumps and bumps, and I just kind of want to make that evident in our painting. I'm coming in with a bit of a darker version of that color to do some highlights there. And even some nice dark brown mixed in. And I'm going to paint a nice light version of this color back where these trees, behind where these trees are going to go. So I'm just doing a nice light so that the blue color is still there between the gaps in the tree branches. And we'll just paint the trees right over top of the blue once it's dried. We'll use a nice dark pigment and it will show up just fine. I'm going to bring that ridge down there and leave a bit of a shadow. And just fill that in until it looks the way you like it. We want some nice contrast between the white from the paper, the lighter shade of blue, and darker blue. And remember, where the tree goes, you don't need as much detail as you do on the right side of the painting. And in the reference photo, you can see there's some yellowy, greeny spots along the closer to the tree line. So I'm just going to add a bit more color into that area. Some brown or green, yellow, whatever you think. And just make sure it's not too concentrated. If it's too dark, like I'm doing here, you can just mop it up with your rag. So I'm getting that yellow ochre and mixing it with some brown, some of the more reddish brown. And we're going to start that land right by the river there, between the mountains and the river. Just our first coat, and keep it nice and light for now. Mixing in some greeny gray in there. And then some gray for the water. That's a little bit too dark, but I'll suck some of that pigment out in a sec. And then the tree line, I'm going to put a little bit of gray there too. So I know the water is a little bit lighter than what I have here, so I'm going to take away some of that pigment. And maybe add a little bit of white in there. In the bottom part of the river, if you have too much pigment, you can take some of that top pigment and bring it down to the bottom to share. And then I'm going to start filling in that little strip of land in between the two sections of river. I'm just painting that with that yellow ochre mixed with the brown and just keeping it really light for now. And now I'm going to take some really light bluey gray and mix it with a lot of water to start creating the shadows from on the clouds. So just paint the bottom, shade the bottom of each of the clouds that you sketched in earlier. We'll do another layer of detail on top of this, but we just want to start with the shadows. And like we did with the mountains, just go straight over where you're going to paint the trees. We'll do that on top. These clouds in the reference photo have some pretty dark shadows, so don't be afraid to use a nice amount of this light gray. So just continue shading in those clouds until you're happy with how it looks for the first layer. And then we're going to start to paint the trunks of these trees. So I just have some of the brown mixed with a tiny bit of black. So I'm going to paint all three trunks to start with. And keeping the one that's the largest, the one closest to us, the thickest. And I found that to be a little bit too black, so I'm going to go in there with a little bit more brown. And we'll let it dry. Once we're completely dry, we are going to start mixing up the green for our pine trees. So I'm using a combination of the lighter green, the darker green, and some of the brown to make that nice forest green. And I'm just going to start roughly doing in some of the branches here. So I'm mostly just kind of roughly following the reference photo for the angle of these branches. So as you notice on the pine trees, there are gaps in between the branches sections where there's just the plain trunk. So you want to make sure you keep some plain trunk poking through there, here and there. And you want to make sure that some of the branches come in front of the trunk as well. So not just from the two sides, but also as if it was the branches were pointing towards you. So covering up some of the trunk and facing and spreading straight towards the person who took the picture. So just continue to work on all three trees until you're happy with the way they look. And if you do make a mistake, something you're not too happy with, just go ahead and suck up the wet paint with your paper towel and try again. So I'm going to go back in with some brown and some of the light green to loosely paint in those bushes that are in front of the trees there. So you just kind of want to have a nice mixture of the greens, browns. We want different shades to come up, to show up and show through. I'm just putting some gray into the background area there and into the land in front of the river, and some gray by the edge of the river for rocks and stones. And now I'm going to start doing our second layer of shadows on our clouds. The more layers you do, the more different shades and darknesses and values of gray there will be, and the more depth that will give your clouds. And we're going to go ahead and let it completely dry again. So we're going to start by putting our final finishing touches there. I'm going to put a little bit more paint on that background mountain because it was kind of starting to blend in with the sky. And I want to make sure that's distinct. And I'm going to add a little bit of blue to the river sections there. Maybe a little white if it was looking a little dark. And I'm going to roughly sketch in a bit more detail into the brush area there. I'm mixing some white with some green to make a kind of a pastel green to mix in there as well. So mostly this is just playing around with different shades of green and brown and the yellows to make it look like the wild bush that we see at the mountains. green was a little too strong for my liking there, so I'm going to soak some of that up. And now I'm going to start working on that tree line there at the base of the mountain. So I just have some green and black on my paintbrush right now, and I'm going to roughly start sketching those trees. I'm just using the vertical stripes. And I'm going to do a few in between those trees there and then connect them all at the bottom. Some of them are going to be a little thicker than others, so I'm going to go in and do a second layer to make some of them thicker. And using that same color just to put a little bit of highlights on those trees again. And if you have any more details you want to put on the mountains or in the brush, you can go ahead and do that now. I'm just putting some spots of yellow in there for some variety. And a little bit more brown on the sand there by the river. I had a little bit of gray on my brush, but it was a little too dark, so I washed it off and went back in there with just some plain water to fix that up. Just to give the water a little bit more depth. And I'm just putting more details in onto the shorelines. And blend that together if necessary with some plain water. I took some dark green and adding a bit more bush kind of shapes into the under the trees. Whatever little details you want to add in, go ahead. And once you're happy with that, we will let it dry completely. Absolutely make sure it's dry this time because we're going to go in with the Sharpie now. So go ahead and grab your Sharpie and we will start adding in some details. I'm just going to do my lines wherever I feel the need. So I'm doing the shoreline. If you don't want line there, don't go ahead, do it your own way, whatever you like. I personally like I'm going to put some shapes in there where the bushes are. I just like the way the ink and paint works together. I'm going to highlight some of those trees there and some of those mountain peaks. And some of those tree branches on the pine. You don't have to do everyone, just here and there is what I like. Just whatever looks nice to you. And go ahead and sign that, and we're going to carefully, slowly take off the masking tape. That white border just makes the paintings look so much more professional. I love it. So now there you have it. You have 3 Albertan landscape watercolor photos. I hope that you are happy with your paintings, and I just love them. Since I had a little bit of extra time, I'm going to make bookmarks with the wild rose on them in honor of Alberta's provincial flower. So I am going to cut out 3 bookmark shapes. You can do however many you want, but I'm going to do 3 and tape them kind of together and work on all 3 at once. But I'm going to do each one in a little bit of a different style. So I'm going to do one that's quite detailed, one that's a little bit less detailed, and one that's very loose. And you can see what kind of one you like. So if you stick them all together, you can just tape the top and the bottom to the table there to keep them together and keep them from wiggling around. So once you have it all nice and secure, I'm going to go ahead and mix a pink for our wild rose. It is really hard, even with using white, to mix a pink from red, but I'm going to try my best. It's not going to be the exact same shade of pink as the flower in the reference photo, but that's just going to have to be okay. It's very hard to mix a pink, like I said. So add as much white as you want. As you can see, it's slightly different shade of pink than the reference photo, but it's just going to have to work. And it looks nice in the end. And I'm just adding extra water to it to make it nice and light too. So I'm going to start by doing a petal. To start at the center of the petal, then you can push your brush, keep it nice and just using the tip. And then as you come around to curve the top of the petal, you will push the brush down, apply more pressure to make the bristles spread out and create that wider part of the petal at the top. So keep your brush thin and pointing using just the tip, then press down and make the nice body of the petal. The wild rose has 5 petals, so make sure you do 5. And we're happy to have a nice variety of shades of the pink. Some petals can be a little darker, some a little lighter. So once you have your 5 petals, I'm going to go ahead and grab a little of that yellow ochre with some green. And we're going to do the branch there with the flower, or with the leaves on it. So I do the leaves in the same way as we did the petals. So keep your brush light and just point it, a very light thin stroke. And you'll notice that these leaves have kind of a jagged edge on them. So we can put that detail in later even. But keep the paintbrush thin and light at the top. Press down on the paintbrush to splay out the bristles and create the wider shape, and then release at the end of the leaf. If the leaf is a bit bigger than your brush is making it, you can just fill in the middle like I did there. So the leaves come, as you see in the picture there, one on each side of the stem, and then so they come in pairs. So make sure you do 2 leaves opposite each other, like in the photo. So this is the most detailed of the 3 bookmarks that I'm going to do. And there's the leaf at the end. I'm going to get a nice dark to start doing the veining on the leaves and the zigzaggy edges to them. So just continue doing that zigzag and the veining until you're happy with it. I would like each leaf to have a little bit of zigzag around the edge there, but each leaf can have a different amount of detail too. And then we're going to grab some yellow for the center of the flower. So there's one big yellow in the middle, surrounded by the white before the petals come, so make sure you leave a space of white. And then you'll see those yellow dots that wild roses have around the center of the flower. I did take a little white and put it at the beginning of the pink too to lighten some of that. But you don't have to do that if you don't want to. And now I'm going to take more yellow and put those little tiny dots around the center of the flower. And touching up any veining you want to touch up. Can be done now. Okay, so I'm happy with that one, and now I'm going to do a quicker, loose version. So quickly doing the petals this time. I mean, you can go slower if you want to, but I'm not as worried about shape. I'm going to do much looser, much less detailed for the last 2, especially the very last one, but just get those 5 petals in there. I'm going to do two flowers on this one. So again, just keeping the brush tip stroke light and thin, and then pressing down to make it nice and round, and then releasing it again at the center once you swoop around in that C-shaped petal. And the yellow for the center. I'm not going to worry about those yellow dots in these ones. And some green. I'm not going to do the whole branch of leaves for this one. I'm just going to do some green leaves. As if they're in the background, kind of. And you can kind of see what style you like better. If you like the more detailed or the looser. And in the end, you'll see you can pick your favorite to use. And this one I'm going to do really quick and really loose. As you can see, the first of the bookmarks, the more detailed, took a lot longer of time than a lot longer to paint than the other two. This one I'm really not even worrying too much about the shape of the petals, just kind of flower based. Sometimes I like that quick and almost sloppy look. Just looks really loose and natural. I'm doing 3 flowers on this one. And the yellows. And let the colors kind of blend in together on that one too. I love the look of that. And some green leaves loosely in the background there. Even looser than the first one. So 3 different styles of Wild Rose bookmarks. I hope you enjoyed the watercolor class and you learned some new tricks and tips, and I hope you love your paintings that you did, and I hope they look great. If you want to frame them, these are 5x7, so you can grab frames that will frame 5x7s with or without a mat, whatever is your preference. But I wanted to do 3 that would look great together on the wall as a trio, and I hope that you're happy with your results. Feel free to, if you want to go through the classes again and if you want to improve or change something about them, I would love to see everybody's put their own spin on these paintings that I made. Well, thank you for joining me, and I hope you enjoyed.